Growing up in a quiet suburb, you expect your nights to be peaceful, maybe even a little boring. But what happened to me over the course of 5 days changed how I look at the dark forever, proving that some playgrounds aren't meant for children. My name is Julian Vance, and this happened to me while living in a small, isolated house right next to Oak Ridge Community Park in Oregon. It all started on a humid Tuesday night at exactly 2 a.m., when the rest of the neighborhood was completely dead silent. I was lying awake in my bed, staring blankly at the dark ceiling, when a sharp, metallic screech suddenly sliced through the quiet atmosphere of my bedroom. It was a slow, rhythmic creak screed, a sound I instantly recognized from my childhood, but it felt deeply wrong and unnatural hearing it at this specific hour of the night. I rolled over and peeked through my plastic blinds, looking out at the pitch-black park that sat just 20 feet from my bedroom window line. The single street lamp on the far corner cast a dim, amber glow over the grass, illuminating the old, rusted swing set that had been abandoned for years. One of the heavy rubber seats was moving violently back and forth, soaring incredibly high into the air, as if someone was pumping their legs with furious energy. But the seat itself was completely empty. There wasn't a single breath of wind to stir the nearby leaves, yet that swing was flying as if driven by pure, unseen malice, its rusted chains groaning under an invisible weight that suddenly made the air in my room feel thick and suffocating. I watched in a trance-like state of utter disbelief, trying to convince myself that a rogue animal or a cruel neighborhood prankster was hiding in the shadows just out of my sight. But the trajectory of the movement was too perfect, too aggressive, and the terrifying momentum only increased with every passing second, sending a primal chill straight down my spine that locked my muscles in place. I stood there frozen at the glass, my heart hammering like a trapped bird against my ribs as I desperately tried to rationalize the impossible sight. A sudden blinding flash of lightning ripped across the dark sky, completely frying the neighborhood street lamp in an explosion of sparks and plunging the entire park into absolute darkness for a split second. But in that brief, brilliant flash of electricity, my eyes locked onto the top horizontal metal bar of the swing set frame, and what I saw erased all logic from my mind. Hanging completely upside down from the bar was a tall, impossibly emaciated figure, its long, spindly limbs wrapped tightly around the steel beam like a massive spider waiting for its prey. Its head was craned backward at a sickening, unnatural angle, staring directly into my second-story bedroom window with wide, unblinking eyes that seemed to catch and reflect the fading light of the storm. When the thunder cracked a moment later, shaking my window panes and vibrating through my chest, the deep darkness swallowed the park once again, hiding the entity from view. I scrambled backward in pure panic, tripping over my bedside rug and hitting the hardwood floor hard, breathing heavily as the rhythmic squeaking of the swing abruptly stopped, leaving an oppressive, terrifying silence in its wake that felt infinitely worse than the noise. I didn't sleep a single wink for the remainder of that agonizing night, and by Wednesday evening, a thick, unnatural fog had rolled in from the nearby woods, blanketing the entire playground in a dense, shifting white haze. I kept all my blinds tightly shut and the curtains drawn, trying my absolute best to convince myself that the upside-down figure was just a trick of the stormlight, a cruel hallucination born from sheer exhaustion and stress. But around 2:15 a.m., the heavy silence of my house was broken not by the familiar screech of the swing, but by a wet, dragging sound originating directly beneath my bedroom window. It sounded like something incredibly heavy and soaked in water was being pulled slowly across the gravel driveway, pausing every few seconds as if catching its breath or listening for movement inside. I forced myself to creep toward the window, my hands trembling so violently I could barely grip the plastic wand to turn the blinds without making a sound. When I finally parted the slats by a fraction of an inch, the fog was far too thick to see the actual swing set structure. But right on the edge of my property line, the mist seemed to warp and twist into a tall, jagged silhouette that stood completely motionless. It just stayed there, blending into the swirling gray vapors, a towering shape that felt entirely malevolent, as if it was staring right through the walls of my house to pinpoint exactly where I was standing in the dark. The next morning, the psychological terror became undeniable when I stepped out onto my front porch to grab the mail and froze in absolute horror at the sight before me. Painted across the clean concrete porch in thick, dark, drying mud were two perfectly formed handprints, but they were monstrously long, with finger marks that stretched nearly 10 inches each. Even worse, the anatomical position of the prints indicated that whatever made them had been standing on its hands, or perhaps hanging from the porch overhang, directly facing my front door while I was hiding upstairs. A distinct trail of wet, black soil and crushed grass led away from the bottom steps, cutting a straight, deliberate line through the dead lawn directly back toward the shrouded playground equipment. My stomach violently churned, and a wave of nausea hit me as I realized this entity wasn't just staying confined to the park boundaries anymore. It was actively exploring my property, learning my layout, and closing the physical distance between us while the neighborhood slept. The realization that only a thin wooden door had separated me from that emaciated upside-down thing left me feeling completely exposed, turning my own home into a fragile cage that it was slowly but surely circling. By Thursday, the psychological toll of the past 48 hours was completely ruining me, leaving me jumping at every minor household noise, while the air inside my home felt permanently freezing cold, no matter how high I turned up the thermostat. I decided to leave my smartphone on the nightstand with a voice recorder app running, hoping to capture some definitive audio proof for the police, since I was now far too terrified to actually look out the window and face whatever was lurking in the mist. At 2:03 a.m., the rhythmic, metallic squeaking of the swing returned with a vengeance, sounding much louder and faster than it ever had before, the rusted metal screaming into the night as if the chains were about to snap off their hinges. But then, before I could even process the noise, my phone screen suddenly lit up the pitch-black room, buzzing violently against the wood as an unknown, heavily corrupted number flashed across the digital display. My hand shook uncontrollably as I answered it, placing the receiver to my ear without saying a single word, hearing nothing but heavy, distorted static and a strange, wet, clicking sound on the other end of the line. Then, a voice broke through the white noise, a raspy, deep, upside-down sounding whisper that mimicked my own vocal pitch perfectly, slowly muttering, "Julian, the view is so much better from up here." I dropped the phone onto the mattress as if the plastic had burned my skin, my breath catching painfully in my throat as a soft, deliberate tapping began directly on my bedroom window glass. It wasn't a normal knock, it was the distinct, rhythmic clicking of long, sharp fingernails dragging slowly down the window pane from the very top of the frame, moving downward in a sickening sequence. Whatever was outside was hanging from my roof gutters, suspended upside down just like it had been on the swing set, its massive, elongated presence blocking out the faint moonlight and casting a distorted shadow across the floor. I pressed my back flat against the furthest wall of my room, clutching an old aluminum baseball bat with white knuckles, watching the silhouette of an elongated, misshapen head press flat against the frosted glass. The heavy window pane actually flexed slightly under the immense pressure, groaning as if it was about to shatter inward at any second and unleash the nightmare directly into my bedroom sanctuary. I squeezed my eyes tightly shut and began to pray in a desperate whisper, enduring 3 agonizing hours of that rhythmic scraping until the very first rays of dawn finally forced the shadow to recede back into the safety of the park. Friday night brought a torrential downpour that completely flooded the suburban streets, the deafening sound of slamming rain doing absolutely nothing to mask the overwhelming dread consuming my mind. I had obsessively deadbolted every single door, locked every window, and moved entirely into the downstairs living room, outright refusing to go anywhere near the second floor, where the terrifying window tapping had occurred the night before. At exactly 2 a.m., the electrical power to the entire neighborhood instantly cut out with a dull pop, plunging my house into a pitch-black void that felt incredibly heavy and suffocatingly hot. A mere second later, above the roaring sound of the storm outside, I heard a loud, splintering crash of breaking wood from the kitchen, immediately followed by the unmistakable sound of wet, dragging footsteps on my hardwood floor. The air inside the house instantly turned foul, smelling heavily of stagnant swamp water, rotting vegetation, and old rusted iron that made my eyes water and my throat constrict in pure panic. I hid flat behind the fabric of the sofa, clutching my heavy flashlight, but refusing to turn it on, listening intently to the creature move through my dark home with a bizarre, clicking gait that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. The footsteps moved with an unsettling, erratic rhythm, dragging and then clicking, as if its skeletal joints were bending completely backward with every single step it took across the house. I heard it enter the living room space, its heavy, wet breathing echoing in the small room, just a few feet away from where I lay, curled on the floor, desperately trying to shrink into the shadows. In the absolute darkness, I could hear it reaching upward, its long, sharp fingers scraping loudly along the textured ceiling panels as it navigated the room upside down, tracking my scent from above. It paused directly above the sofa where I was hiding, and I could hear a thick, foul liquid slowly dripping from its clothing or skin, splattering onto the fabric cushions right next to my exposed head with a sickening pop. I held my breath until my lungs burned, tears streaming down my face as the creature let out a low, disappointed hiss that sounded exactly like escaping steam from a broken pipe. It slowly dragged its massive weight back toward the kitchen entrance, but the temporary relief I felt was instantly shattered when I heard the heavy wood of my front door slowly creak wide open, letting the cold storm wind howl inside. When Saturday morning finally arrived, the torrential rain had stopped, leaving behind a cold gray mist that hung low over the entire neighborhood and muffled all normal daytime sounds. I walked out of my house in a complete sleep-deprived daze, my front door having been left wide open to the damp morning air, revealing a horrific trail of black mud leading out from my living room. My gaze was automatically drawn to the playground across the lawn, where the fog seemed to part just enough to reveal the rusted swing set sitting perfectly, unnaturally still in the center of the park. But as I forced my shaking legs to step closer to the property line, I noticed something small and dark sticking out of the churned mud directly beneath the specific swing that had been moving so violently all week. Resting in the wet black dirt was my own leather wallet, which I had distinctly left on my secure kitchen counter the night before, now completely ruined, caked in filth, and intentionally placed as a calling card. Inside, my driver's license had been partially pulled out of its plastic slot, and my face on the photo had been aggressively scratched out by what looked like 5 sharp, deeply grooved fingernails that had torn right through the laminated plastic card. I stood there in the quiet morning light, the cold dampness soaking through my shoes, realizing with absolute certainty that this entity wasn't a localized ghost tethered to the park. It was a hunter, and it had officially chosen me as its next target. The playground equipment was just the bait it used to draw my attention, a twisted psychological game meant to break my mind and isolate me before it finally claimed what it wanted from inside my home. I packed a single duffel bag that very afternoon, leaving almost all of my lifelong belongings and the house itself behind, and drove completely out of that town without ever looking back once in the rearview mirror. I live in a crowded city apartment now, miles away from any suburban parks or open green spaces. But every time it rains heavily at night, I swear I can hear a faint, metallic squeaking echoing from somewhere just outside my walls. And sometimes, when I look up at the dark bedroom ceiling before falling asleep, I am absolutely terrified that I will catch a glimpse of those wide, unblinking eyes staring back down at me from the shadows above. And you know what? I used to think I ran away to save my life. But last night, I found a trace of fresh, wet mud clinging to the ceiling directly above my new bed.